when it comes to women in power throughout history, were any of them truly in the wrong, or were the history books just very judgy and biased? Look, my opinion tends to fall towards the latter, so let me know your take in the comments, and let's explore some great historical figures. We're kicking off today with Rani of Jhansi. She was the Maharani consort of the princely state of Jhansi in Maratha Empire from 1843 till 1853, by marriage to the Maharaja Gangadhar Rao Nuarkar. I tried, folks. When the Maharaja died in 1853, the British East India Company, under Governor General Lord Dalhousie, refused to recognize the claim of his adopted heir and annexed Jhansi under the doctrine of lapse. The Indian warrior queen is known for joining the revolution against British oppression in 1857, shortly after they deposed the queen. She led the successful defense of Jhansi against company allies, but in early 1858, Jhansi fell to British forces under the command of Hugh Rose. The Rani managed to escape on horseback and joined the rebels in capturing Gwalior, where they proclaimed Nana Sahib as Peshwa of the revived Maratha Empire. Rani was trained as a horseback rider and sword wielder from a young age, and was quick to join the fight for India's freedom. Several slayings of British civilians occurred during this period, and whether or not Rani was involved is disputed. The British certainly believe she oversaw the slayings, and she ultimately perished fighting against them. She died in June of 1858 after being mortally wounded during the British counterattack at Gwalior, and is viewed today as a hero in India against tyranny. So, I don't know if she was necessarily evil, but a woman in power, I like. Here's another lesser known ruler, Nzinga of Ndongo and Matamba. She was a southwest African ruler who ruled as queen of the Umbudu kingdoms. She received military and political training when she was young and demonstrated an aptitude for diffusing political crises as an ambassador to the Portuguese Empire. In 1624, she assumed power over Ndongo after the death of her brother Mbandi, and she ruled during a period of rapid growth of the African slave trade and encroachment by the Portuguese Empire in southwest Africa. Now, the Portuguese declared war on Ndongo in 1626, and by 1628, the army had been severely depleted and went into exile. In search of allies, she married Mbangala warlord Kazanje. In addition to using Christianity as a diplomatic tool, she adopted Christian customs into her court. So from the 1650s onwards, she increasingly relied on Christian converts at said court. Just as she had done with the Mbangalan culture before, she appropriated aspects of Christian ideology and culture, adding these to her existing court traditions to create a new class of Christian counselors loyal to her. She also began practicing Catholic-inspired rituals, placed crosses in places of high honor in her court, and built many churches across her kingdom. Now, her efforts to convert her people were not without controversy, and some conservative religious figures kind of pushed back against her policies. In response, she empowered her Christian priests to burn the temples and shrines of practitioners who opposed her, in order that they be arrested and turned over to her for trial. Traditionalists were dismissed from her court, after which she sentenced them to public whippings. Several prominent Mbundu and Mbangala priests were sold as slaves to the Portuguese, with Nzinga personally asking that they be shipped overseas. Profits of the sale were then used to furnish a new church. Some of the wanted priests, however, escaped the purge and went into hiding. Look, I was all for her until she forced people to convert to Christianity and then banished them when they didn't. That's where I draw the line. Here's another lady ruler, the Byzantine Empress Irene of Athens, who ruled between 797 to 802 CE. She co-ruled with her son for 2 decades before leading the kingdom by herself. Atta girl. Her son, Emperor Constantine VI, was an unpopular emperor. The mother-son duo was indeed a Greek tragedy. She was an ambitious woman, but she wanted full control of the empire. Like, I don't blame her for that part. Here's how she did it though. With the help of some political allies, she led a conspiracy against her own son. Eventually, they did reconcile, but I'm not done yet. In 786, the public turned against Constantine after he decided to divorce his wife and marry his mistress, and Irene took advantage of that and once again conspired against her son. She ordered his arrest and gouged his eyes out. Like, look, it's a little extreme. Most if not all historians agree that she only blinded him for her own personal selfish political gain, since he wasn't really that bad of an emperor and wasn't doing anything to make any situations worse, so her killing him was kind of pointless. Pun not intended. Her lack of an heir and continued loss of legitimacy is what doomed her. Like, if she had just kidnapped her son and shipped him off somewhere, then historians would probably like her more. Maybe. I'm not so sure how I feel about her. Queen Ranavalona, the first of Madagascar, slayed her way to the crown, and sadly, not in a modern slay, more like a bad slay. Queen Ranavalona was the ruler of Madagascar from 1828 to 1861, and much of what we know about her has been influenced by the opinions of Ranavalona's European contemporaries. They generally condemned her policies and characterized her as a tyrant at best and insane at worst. Still, she was known as a fierce leader who was willing to do anything to protect her crown and kingdom. After her husband, King Radama I, passed, she quickly positioned herself as the new sovereign of the kingdom. She had her uncle executed to protect her position, and some accounts say that she eliminated his mother via extreme hunger in order to keep her from breaking a sacred decree about spilling noblewoman's life source. Now, she pursued a policy of isolationism and self-sufficiency, reducing economic and political ties with European powers, repelling a French attack on the coastal town of Full Point, and taking vigorous measures to eradicate the small but growing Malagasy Christian movement initiated under Radama I by members of the London Missionary Society. She made heavy use of the traditional practice of forced labor as tax payment to complete public works projects and develop a standing army of between 20 to 30,000 Marina soldiers, whom she deployed to pacify outlying regions of the island and further expand the realm. The combination of regular warfare, disease, difficult forced labor, and harsh trials by ordeal, using a poisonous nut from the Tangena shrub, resulted in a high mortality rate among both soldiers and civilians during her 33-year reign, with Madagascar's population reducing from 5 million in 1833 to 2.5 in 1839. Like, I get being ambitious, I get wanting to protect your country, but that's a really bad dip in population. Princess Olga of Kiev burned her political enemies alive while she was Queen Regent. So there's a lot of mystery surrounding her, and there's a lot of the stories tend to have some holes in them, but what we do know is that she was a Ukrainian princess and the first female ruler in Russian history. She became Queen Regent in 945 CE after her husband, Igor I, was slain. And since their son was a little too young to rule, they're like, okay, you're queen. One of her first acts was to seek revenge for her husband's demise. So by her orders, the men responsible were captured and executed using scalding water. And she didn't stop there, or else she wouldn't be too memorable. In her fury, she ordered the hundreds of people from the men's tribe to be taken out in retribution for her husband. Some accounts suggest that Olga had the tribe leaders be buried alive, and that she devised a plan to set their entire town on fire. One story suggests that she fooled the tribe leaders by inviting them to a retreat, then locked them in a bathhouse and burned it down. Whatever really happened, and it's not fun, Olga devoted herself to Orthodox Christianity shortly after her vengeance was complete. Despite her past, she eventually became the first person of Russian heritage to receive sainthood from the Orthodox Church. Okay, I get wanting revenge, I do, but there's a line. How about we chat about another notable Russian ruler next? When Catherine the Great first arrived in Russia, no one knew that this relatively unimportant German princess will one day rule all of Russia. She was eventually married to Tsar Paul III, who was an unpopular leader. He had run afoul of the Orthodox Church, and even his own wife wrote in memoirs that he was a feeble-minded drunkard. Oof, not good. Catherine took on a lover, Grigory Orlov, and together they were able to court the country's military leadership and overthrow the husband. She was a talented horseback rider and personally led 14,000 soldiers to depose the Tsar. Afterwards, she donned a male uniform and declared herself the Empress of Russia. Also, she apparently was like a bit of a Luddite. She did not understand the true power of the Industrial Revolution, and she was against introducing machines into Russia. You know, emerging industries. Primarily iron smelting, fabric production, those things that like really could make some money. She thought the machines destroyed jobs, and like, I get it, but oh boy. So this led to a predictable crisis at the end of the 18th century when Russian industries fell way behind their Western competition. Once again, I get it, it's just not a good move. Time to leave Russia and talk about Zenobia, the 3rd century queen of the Palmyran Empire in Syria. Many legends surround her ancestry. She was probably not a commoner, and she married the ruler of the city, Odaenathus. Her husband became king in 260, elevating our girl to supreme power in the Near East by defeating the Sasanian Empire of Persia and stabilizing the Roman East. Now, after her husband's assassination, Zenobia became regent of her son Vabalithus and held de facto power throughout his reign. In 270, Zenobia launched an invasion that brought most of the Roman East under her sway and culminated with the annexation of Egypt. By mid-271, her realm extended from Ancyria, central Anatolia, to Upper Egypt, although she remained nominally subordinate to Rome. However, in reaction to the campaign of the Roman Emperor Aurelian in 272, Zenobia declared her son emperor and assumed the title of empress, thus declaring the succession from Rome. The Romans were victorious after heavy fighting. The empress was besieged in her capital and captured by Aurelian, who exiled her to Rome, and that's where she spent the rest of her time. Fredegund of Soissons was queen consort to King Chilperic I, who ruled from 561 to 584 CE. Now she came from humble beginnings, but quickly rose to a position of power in the small Frankish kingdom. She convinced her husband to leave his first wife and slay his second, ensuring her close relationship with the king was secure. So after all that happened, enter Brunhild. She was the wife of Sigebert I, the king of Austrasia, who was half-brother to Chilperic. This caused a fierce rivalry between the two queens because she was like, yo, why are you making your husband leave all these people? And they had a lot of death. Wasn't fun. Okay, here's a name everybody should know, Catherine de Midici. It was no new news that Henry II of France had a lifelong affair with his mistress Diane de Poitiers. Well, on his deathbed, he begged his wife, Queen Catherine, to allow him to see her. And the queen was like, yeah, no, Diane's not even coming anywhere near this room. The king died a lonely and painful death without his love by his side. But, okay, that's not what made her a terrible queen. The queen mother had a rebellious daughter named Margaret, who decided to cross the queen, and Catherine was like, I'm gonna get my revenge. She would fight over her married daughter's adultery and affairs. It is said that Catherine's screams could be heard echoing throughout the palace. During one instance, when the queen mother found out about her daughter's new romantic interest, well, she locked her up in the castle and we never saw her ever again. Now look, I do understand that these emotions might have stemmed from the fact that, well, Catherine's husband had a mistress. But she proved herself as one of the worst queens in history when she ordered that her daughter's romantic interest be executed in front of her. So her son, King Henry, was like, okay, that's a bit too much. He had the guy executed, but like not in front of his sister. Alrighty folks, we're ending today with Isabella of France. She had a complicated relationship with her husband, King Edward II of England. The relationship would end over their opposing politics and a breakdown of trust in each other. Edward was known to keep male favorites close to him, often as advisors. Hugh Despencer the Younger became his chamberlain in 1318 and immediately began to push Isabella out of the king's sphere of influence. Edward began to favor Despencer over Isabella to the point where it was like, go do something else. Eventually, Edward faced conflict with King Charles of France, Isabella's brother. Isabella's lands were confiscated and she left for France. After Edward refused to return her land and get rid of Despencer, she and her brother invaded England and deposed the king. Now their son, Edward III, was then named as ruler of England. You know what? After everything else today, killing your husband? It doesn't seem so bad anymore. And that's all for me once again. I've been Alexa, your resident emo girly. I'll see y'all next time I buzz in over here at Bumblebee.